Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be working on another doll that is a part of my Japanese yokai series. It's been a while since I made one of those dolls and people started asking me if I'm going to continue this series. And the answer is, of course I am. I named this series The Night Parade of 100 Demons not only because it sounds cool, but because I'm crazy enough to actually aim to achieve this number at some point. I planned to make this doll for the mermaid event, so I was looking for a water yokai and I chose to make a Kame-Onna, or a turtle woman. Kame-Onna is described as a big sea turtle with a human head and a broad hairy tail, but I'm going for a more humanoid look today. As a base I chose a Gina Fire doll. She has reptilian skin texture that could work for a turtle as well. I start off with implanting a magnet on her back for the future shell. I purposely chose pretty big magnets because I assume that the shell will be quite heavy and the magnet has to be able to hold it through her outfit as well. Before gluing the magnet, I also placed a piece of wire in the cavity for additional support and also to make sure that the magnet won't fall into her body. The top half of the magnet fit in just perfectly, but in the bottom I ended up with a little opening and a piece of wire sticking out. I covered it with epoxy sculpt, trying to blend it in with her original skin texture. After sanding, I painted it gold and then sealed with clear enamel paint. It's not perfect, but I think it will do, especially considering that on the video it zoomed in a lot. Before I start working on the shell, I protected her body with plastic wrap. Then I used foil to fill up the space inside her future shell that is supposed to be empty. Later I will build the shell over this foil base. While building up the layer of foil, I also make sure to plant some space between her body and the shell for her future outfit and tail. Then I measure the length and the width of the shell to make a pattern. I use these two measurements to draw an oval first. And then I need to measure around the shell and find the difference between this measurement I took from the shell and from the blueprint. For me, it's about 10 centimeters, so now I need to get rid of them by placing a few dots along the edge. These dots won't look good because they will be simply too wide for the shell. Usually when we make dots on clothes, we need to make sure that the width of the dot is at least 3 times smaller than its depth. But here I will be using Warbler thermoplastic, which means that I can still stretch and shape this element on her back until it lays nicely. So for now, my task is just to get rid of the extra material. Here's what I got. It looks a bit ugly, but it's just a base I'm going to use for sculpting, and the only thing that's important here is its general shape. Next, I'm going to build up some volume using silk clay. Silk clay is not a good material for detailed work, but it's very lightweight, so I use it under epoxy to reduce the overall weight of the element. In the end, the shell turned out quite heavy anyway, but without a layer of silk clay, the doll wouldn't be able to stand with this shell on her shoulders at all. Her knee joints would bend under its weight, and she would also fall to the back because of the shifted center of gravity. Never underestimate the weight of epoxy sculpt. I already mentioned that this yokai is called Kame-Onna, a turtle woman, but her second name is Honengame, a fruitful year turtle, because she is associated with great harvests and in general she is a really positive spirit. She has fortune-telling abilities and usually predicts great harvests, but she can also warn people about upcoming disasters, so they have time to prepare and do something to help themselves. Even her image was believed to have very strong protective abilities and was used as a charm against diseases and evil spirits. Kame-Onna prefers to stay deep in the sea, away from humans, and contacts people only if she has some really important business or a message to tell. Sounds relatable. What I really like about Japanese mythology is that yokai are not necessarily good or evil creatures. They are just living their life around people as a part of the environment. They all have different personalities and roles, just as us humans. According to traditional Japanese beliefs, a turtle in general is a symbol of longevity, good luck, and support. So maybe that's why a turtle woman is also a supportive spirit. Who knows? While sculpting her shell, I mostly improvised, but still based on the elements I took from actual existing turtles. I also realized that I actually enjoy sculpting organic elements, because here you don't need to fight for symmetry and perfect lines, but you can just go with the flow and sculpt as you feel, and I think it makes the entire process rather relaxing. When I sculpt small elements, I always need to have a lot of control over my entire body for my hands to not shake, and for me to be able to work on things more precisely. But this shell is a pretty large accessory compared to the things I usually sculpt, so it still took much time, but the work process wasn't taking as much energy from me, because I didn't need to concentrate too much. And I think that's what made the working on this project in general more enjoyable as well. When I was finally satisfied with the shape of the shell, I sanded it, washed off all the dust, and sprayed it with black primer. If you don't want to buy a primer, you can use MSC as a primer as well, as I always did before I bought this black one. I feel like this black primer doesn't feel any different from MSC anyway, except that it has color. But paint sticks to both of them just as good. It's so impressive how much dimension your sculpt can get from just dry brushing it and adding some wash. But I also added some subtle gradients to the spikes and some other elements to make the paint job look more detailed and finished. I also wanted to make these spikes match her future horns. I recently got an interesting comment about black paint. A person in the comments correctly noticed that in traditional painting it is not recommended to use actual black paint, not only for shadows, but also for actually black objects. And they suggested that if I use complementary colors for shading, it could improve my paint job. What I think about it is that in traditional painting we use complementary colors because if you use black for shadows you might end up with dirty colors, especially if you work on a well-lit composition, while mixing in some complementary colors would make transitions more smooth and subtle. In miniature painting, however, smooth transitions are not as important. I want to add dimension, because the details are so small they don't even have the natural shadows that human-sized items have. So here we are trying to imitate that natural shadow by adding as much contrast as possible, and no complementary color would let you achieve the depths the black paint can. For example, this shell is supposed to be brown, so I chose burnt umber as the main color, then I gave it a darker wash using Van Dyke's brown, but then I ended up with all cavities, including light textures, being the same depth. So I had to use the darkest color possible, which is black, to differ deeper cracks from some light textures. In general, I think these rules we learn in art schools are very helpful, and you need to learn them to understand how mediums work and how you can achieve certain results, but they never should be taken as law you must blindly obey.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
I say we should learn the rules to be able to break them consciously. It's recommended to avoid black because the black pigment is difficult to work with, but beginner artists like to stick it everywhere because they don't know the chemistry behind mediums and color theory yet. So your teacher would want you to avoid black so you can learn the theory and practice it. But saying that artists in general purposely avoid black would be a bit of a hypocrisy, because this avoiding black thing only appeared in the 18th century and people started to use the color called Cologne Earth, or what is called now Van Dyke Brown, instead of black. But you get this color by mixing black and red-brown pigments. So while you avoid black, you actually use it in disguise. And before that, there were people like Rembrandt who used a lot of black in his work, and I don't think that anyone would dare to say that he was bad at painting because he painted a black hat black. Nice try, Rembrandt, but now go throw your hands in the bin. I'm just joking. The person from the comments was actually respectful and wasn't really wrong, but I just wanted to use it as an example of when you learn something, it doesn't mean that this is the only way. You learn art theory to assist you and not to lock yourself inside the box. Locking yourself inside the box is the worst thing you can do as an artist. It just kills creativity. There's even some art schools that purposely mold their students for everyone to draw the same way, to the level that you can't tell one artist from another, but you can tell which art school they came from. Who knows, maybe that's why traditional art is dying out these days. Even judging from what I see on Instagram, almost every artist I like are self-taught, and I think this is because everyone can learn rules and technical skills, but not everyone has an idea, passion, emotion displayed through their artwork. And it's impossible to stay passionate about art if you turn it into following rules like a robot, repeating the same algorithm over and over again. You know what I mean? Did I mention that I started working on this doll back in May? Well, now I did, and originally I wanted to make her outfit and makeup in green and gold color palette, all covered in beads, rhinestones and sequences, as if she is some sort of a treasure hidden in the deep sea. But after I came back to her in July, my vision changed completely. I tried to give her the face-up I originally wanted, but for some reason I didn't like it. Now looking at the footage, I feel like it wasn't bad at all, so maybe some self-sabotaging took place again. But I think it happened for the best though, because removing this face-up made me come up with something better, inspired by actual turtles. I changed the shape of her eyes by making them more round and increasing the distance between them, and gave her more natural makeup. I don't know if I mentioned before that I feel quite insecure about my face-up. This be told, I don't think that they are bad, but I think my face-up skills are a bit behind my sewing and sculpting skills, and it's disturbing me. With this new face-up, I didn't get this feeling though. To be honest with you, I liked it so much I built the rest of her look around this face, for it to be the center of the composition and make sure that no other element is stealing attention from it. I think it was also a step out of my comfort zone, because this face-up looks different from what I usually do. Like, instead of making it more cartoonish with using strong colors and contrasts, I went for more natural and yet detailed look. I still decided to integrate some of that turtle skin pattern into her eye makeup though, just to make it a bit more interesting. Seems like I can't stay away from strong eye makeups anyway. But to be honest with you, this example of self-sabotaging working out well for me is more of an exception than the rule. Usually I either end up ruining something by fixing it or procrastinate, because I think that I will do a bad job and waste my time for nothing. Patreon helped me deal with the procrastinating problem, because I told myself that I need to post something every day or at least every second day, and even if an experiment doesn't work out, it could still become a post that could help people learn from my mistakes. I can't include the entire process and all of my fails in my YouTube videos because it would make them way too long and boring and maybe even confusing. So before I started Patreon, my failed experiments actually were a waste of time. I know people say it's not a waste of time if you learn something from it, but understanding of that doesn't help at all because it feels like the time wasted on failure is pushing us away from achieving our goals. Plus, the human brain doesn't really like to put effort into something that doesn't give us a dopamine reward. So, if we don't learn how to ignore it, our brain will just keep sabotaging us into procrastinating and getting some cheap dopamine from watching reels or maybe playing games, for example. So, if you struggle with this problem as well, I have some good advice for you. Believing in yourself is overrated, and you can't actually believe in yourself without having proof that you are worth believing in. So to actually start believing in yourself, you need to get results first. But what to do if the fear of failure stands between you and Mount Doom? Fake it till you make it. Try to see your task from the perspective of a person who has the skills you want to learn. How do you think they would act? Imagine that you are that person and repeat the steps you think they would do. Looking at things from a third-person perspective always helps, just as it helps to give yourself advice as if you were a friend, because usually we are more strict to ourselves than to other people. If you would like to stay with my projects through thick and thin and follow my creative process in real time, I invite you to join my Patreon, where I post my daily progress and tips that we can discuss together. In August, I also made a studio tour and organizing video as my Patreon special, so if you are interested, you can find the link in my bio. But for now, I'd like to thank my first patrons who already joined. Thank you so much, not only for subscribing, but also for the time you spent with me and your comments, because you really make me feel motivated to go work on those even if I feel lazy or don't believe in myself. You guys are like Sophie to my inner Calcifer.
You're a first-class fire demon. I like your spark.
She likes my spark.
The face up is almost done now. I only need to gloss her eyes, lips, and also the spots around her eyes. I don't gloss my face ups often because gloss is reflective and makes it difficult to take good photos of the face up, but in this case gloss was needed to make the face more expressive and complete. Gloss makes colors look more saturated, and in this case I wasn't able to build up more saturation with pencils. I also want to give her a pair of cute little horns to complete the look. I glue a bead to the wire and then pin it in the foam mushroom. The bead is needed to keep the wire in place. If you are making longer horns, you could also glue it a bit lower to still have a bit of the wire armature for the horn itself. I wanted them to be a perfect cone shape, but it's not easy to sculpt geometric shapes by hand, so I sculpted them a bit larger to have more material for sanding them later as well. Bye bye nail polish! Then I primed them with MSC and painted them ivory. Ivory has bad coverage, so it took me 3 layers, but then I also applied 1 layer of this effect paint called Fairy Dust, just as I did with the shell. I wanted the horns on her head to match the spikes on the shell. I sprayed them with glossy top coat and now we can place them on her head. This was a bit challenging because I shrank her head and now I had to drill openings for the horns with the Dremel, but it worked out well. The horns turned out a bit bigger than I planned, but hey, I like this version too. I think it suits her even better. Next up is her outfit. First of all, I made her a juban. It's like a first layer people usually wear under kimono. I showed how to make it many times already, so I'll just leave a link to that video. I wanted to make the upper layer out of gold mesh with glitter, but the mesh itself turned out lighter color than I expected and it didn't look good with black, so I had to come up with something else. In my stock box I have this gold satin fabric that looks good, but is a bit too strong for my concept. So I decided to try tone it down with black chiffon. Like this I'll get a black kimono with subtle golden shimmer. It kinda looks like taffeta now, but not as stiff. Usually the front halves of kimono consist of two details, but I decided to make one of them a single piece to reduce the thickness of the seams. But I still made the upper half with a seam to make it look authentic. Before sewing, I secured all of the cuts with fray check because both of these fabrics are the type that will literally fall apart on your hands. If you work with fabrics that fray easily, it's also recommended to leave bigger seam allowances to make up for it. After the glue dried, I put the matching details on top of each other, pinned them, and sewed them together with running stitches all the way around the edge of the detail. It takes a while, but it is the only way to make sure these layers won't get misaligned while sewing the kimono together. Here's what I got. I love the iridescent effect. I wasn't sure if this kimono is going to work out because of the layers making the seams even thicker than usual, but it seems to work out fine though. This final design doesn't include the beads and embroidery I originally planned, but sometimes a simple looking design actually requires more work than a complex looking one, and I think this is one of those cases. Like here, I need to keep straight lines and make seams lay flat, but I work with polyester and it's 2 layers, so sometimes just ironing them is not enough, especially around the collar, so I had to additionally fix allowances with hand stitches to make them lay flat. In one of the places around the collar, I had 14 layers of fabric meeting in one spot. And it's a lot even for the human scale, let alone for dolls. So I think it would be reasonable to actually make the front details without a seam in the middle. Actual kimono has the seam because back in the day the width of fabric rolls was so small there was not enough fabric to wrap a person. So people had to do some patchwork. Look, I made one half a solid piece and another half with a seam, and they look almost the same. I still like the look of the one with the seam slightly more though. In general, this kimono turned out even better than I thought, so I guess I wore it for nothing, probably because chiffon is pretty thin and didn't add that much bulk. I think if I used taffeta instead of layers, the result would be much worse because taffeta is more stiff than these fabrics altogether and the end result would look a little less higher quality. I also made the sleeves of the second kimono a bit longer than the first one, so the sleeves of the first kimono can freely go in and out. In my first concept, she wasn't supposed to wear shoes because she's a sea creature, but with the new kimono her feet looked too empty. So first of all, she needs a pair of white socks. I think this other white item will complement her horns as well. And on Patreon I was advised to make her shoes look like algae to make them more fitting for a sea creature. And I remembered that I had this fabulous pair of Ever After High shoes that look like leaves. They are also gold that matches well with the kimono. I'd like to remove these beads from the middle to make them look even more like a plant though. Then I cleaned them with alcohol, primed with MSC and gave them a brown wash for extra dimension. The MSC and acrylics made them matte though, so I'm dry brushing them with gold to get some of the shine back. I think they fit the concept so good I wouldn't come up with a better idea myself. It's always so helpful to have someone to discuss your project with. Next, she needs a broad hairy tail. I left a hole in her body for attaching a tail, but I forgot to leave openings in her outfit. But it's for the best, because I think it's better to make the tail optional anyway. For the tail, I used this black fur with interesting texture. It's not fluffy enough to hide the seams though, but I pulled out some hairs from the seam allowances and it made the seams almost invisible. I added an elastic on top to attach it to the doll and also trimmed some fur that will be under her shell to reduce the bulk. I did it only from one side though, so even without a shell it won't be visible. And the last accessory she needs is the obi. I was trying around random fabrics to see what fits well with her outfit, but then I found this piece of leather with reptilian looking texture. And after I put it on the doll, I realized that not only its texture, but also the asymmetrical form looks great. So while making the pattern, I made sure to preserve the curve this leather scrap originally had and filled the missing parts with lace. I pinned the folds on the lace first and then secured them with two temporary machine seams. I removed the pins and ironed the lace to make the folds keep form and then hand sewed it to the leather. The belt looks so cool I would wear it myself. I mean, it's leather and lace, what not to like? And that was it. Let's put on her shell and look at the end result pictures. The final concept turned out a bit darker than I originally wanted, but so what? I like this cute and elegant look just as much. But I think I'll think about the old concept a bit more and recycle it for another character from this series. I have an idea of a character who could pull off that look even better. Let me know in the comments section what you think about this project, and if you like this video, give it a like. It will be a big help for my channel. And if you would like to support my channel further, you can subscribe to my Patreon for more in-depth content or buy me a coffee. All of the links you can find in the description box. Even though I started Patreon now, my giveaway offer for buy me a coffee still stands. For every 100 coffees I reach, I'll make a giveaway and the winner will get a custom doll commission. Each coffee equals 1 entry. And right now I'm already working on a doll for the second winner of this giveaway. You will see its video in September. Thank you very much for spending your time with me, and I hope to see you soon in my next video. Bye!